Those of you that might be on Facebook, maybe you have noticed that here recently there's been a couple of opportunities for you to check your memory and find out exactly when you grew up and what you remember. It's those nostalgia little entries that get put out there by people that say, like this if you recognize this picture. So we're going to do a little bit of a test this morning to see how much you know about your past. Because we're going to be talking about what our past does for us and how we can go into the future with that. So I've kind of compiled here a series of pictures. We're going to go through here and we're going to see right off the bat, we'll put a picture up there, and if you know what it is, I just want you to raise your hand, okay? Okay, so we'll try this first picture. Anybody know what that is? Wow, everybody does. A potato masher. Now, I haven't seen one of these for a long time. I haven't seen one used since my mother used one when I was back in high school. Most of the time, when Carolyn's preparing the mashed potatoes, she just throws it into the mixer and stirs it all up with a little bit of milk, stuff like that. You haven't used one of these for an awful long time. Okay, so let's see, what about this picture? Now, how many of you remember sitting on the kitchen floor with that in your hand, talking to your friends, twirling your hands in the cord? Okay. Anybody under the age, there isn't very many of them out there, but anybody under the age of 25 didn't know telephones came with a cord. It's been that long since there's been one. Everything else has been cordless. Okay? Okay, let's look at the next one. How many of you had one of those? Brownie camera? What size film did it take? 27? 127. Okay? And then they came out with the 110. It was a little cartridge so that you could have the little flat camera. You remember those? No. Some people are saying, what's that? This was in its heyday, this was the best camera you could own. And it had the flash bulb in there that you had to change every time. Some of the kids are going, what? You had to change the bulb? Okay, let's look at the next one here. See if you know it. Anybody know what that is? Okay, that's fewer hands than we did last time. So what is it? That's right. It's the little insert that goes into a 45 RPM record that looks like this. It had the big hole in the middle of it. This is so you could play a 45 RPM record on a regular phonograph. And most people are saying, the younger generation said, what's a phonograph? A record player. Okay, they've never seen a record. Okay, but it was doing that. Otherwise, you had to play it on this kind of player. I remember my mom and dad having one of these. In fact, when we were cleaning out their house, I could have swore there was still one in the house, but I couldn't find it. I thought it'd be a great thing to set up on my shelf as a nostalgia piece, but it wasn't there. Okay, let's try this one. You know what that is? That's an 8-track tape. That's right. Most people didn't know that they even made an 8-track tape. Most of the younger generation doesn't even know there's a cassette player or a cassette tape. This is an 8-track player, and you could get the best tunes and everything that you wanted to on one of those things. Okay? Played about 45 minutes, played in your car, had one of those great big old huge players that was underneath the dash. Okay? Okay? The ones that you always knocked your knees on when you slid in, you know? That was okay. Let's try this. Oh, everybody throws up their hand on that one. That was S&H green stamps. For those of you in the younger generation may not know what that is, you used to get those every time you bought something. You would take those stamps, you could get them at the grocery store, hardware store, any place that you went, you'd get a roll or a page of stamps and you'd throw it into this book, and then you'd fill up those books, and after you got a book that was full, or several books that were full, then you could take it into a redemption center and exchange it for whatever you wanted. We bought our first, if I remember right, the very first thing we bought with our green stamps was a folding table and 4 chairs. Okay, that was our first. We still got that table and chairs, by the way. Okay, but we used it to buy those. I mean, you could do that. So that was a redemption that they were using, that businessmen used to get you into the store. And I think there's a couple more here. How about this one? That's right. It's an aluminum ice cube tray. Now, for you, the younger generation, that handle that's in the middle, you pulled that handle up and it broke the ice loose so that you could get the ice cubes out of there. That was before the plastic trays came out. And I think we've got one more picture. Anybody know what that is? Okay, that's right. It's a skate key. It goes along with this. I thought maybe there'd be fewer people that would know that. But, if you owned a pair of skates that clamped on your shoes, you needed to have a skate key. And when I was growing up, everybody had a skate key. You either carried it in your pocket or you had it on a piece of string around your neck. Because if you never knew when you were going to clamp those on your shoes and you were going to head off down the street. Okay? So those are the kind of things we think back on those things, and we think about how important those things were in the way that we lived our lives, until you run up with one of your buddies and says, "Why did your mother say that she liked a horse?" That's Mr. Ed. That's right. I remember Mr. Ed. I mean, it's fine to think about those nostalgia until somebody says, "Well, what is your mother, or what are you doing liking a horse?" They'd never seen Mr. Ed. Well, see, it's fun for us to look back on those kinds of things that says, this is what your life was like before. To think about all those things that have changed. All those things that make that nostalgia, that idea of thinking back on what our lives are about, that's important. But it's not the whole way that our life works. We got caught up here in the church many times, caught in nostalgia by saying we've always done it this way, or we've never done it that way before. See, sometimes we let that nostalgia, we let that past dictate what our future is going to be. Now, our past does help us think about the future, but it shouldn't dictate our future. It's good for us to think that some of the things have changed. I mean, that's one of the things that brings us together, is the idea that lives will change. Our life will change. Our life in Christ will be different. It won't resemble what it was before. And we wrestle with that. The whole experience of that. After all, we really don't want to be in an 8-track life, to live an 8-track life in an iPod world, do we? Do we really want to live our lives back there when we have so many conveniences today? After all, we don't want to be that way. We want to be new creations in Christ. Now, a little bit of a nostalgia is helpful for us, but as disciples of Christ, we want to go beyond that. And Paul understood that. In fact, in this letter to the Corinthians, the second letter to the Corinthians, he tells us that following Christ will change our lives. He puts it this way: if anyone is in Christ, he or she, they are a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. It's kind of like 8 tracks to iPods, or having milk delivered to your door instead of going to the supermarket and picking up milk that's made with soy. I mean, that's the changes in our lives that are good for us, yes. But do we want to go back to the past, or do we want to look to the future? We can be connected to that life-giving love of Jesus Christ as part of our lives, as part of this transformation of who we are and what we have become, that will make a difference in our lives. It's an incredible change that brings new lives when we become part of Christ's discipleship, when we become part of what Christ is doing new in our lives. That's why every so often it's good for us to renew our faith, kind of like moms and dads do, or like myself do on Facebook. It's good for us to go back and think about those things that we do, to reminisce about how far we've come in Christ. Why? Why go back and think about the past? So we can recognize how important our present really is. How we can really feel how blessed we really are. And that's where we need to be. We need to understand that we aren't like we were 20, 30, 40 years ago. We're better. Think about the time that you changed your lives by saying, I'm going to be a follower of Christ. I'm going to do the things that Christ taught me to do. I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to understand where Christ was, and I'm going to change my life. I'm going to do things different. I'm not going to do them like I did in the past. Think about that time. And it's where we've been that makes us so important to figure out where we're going. So let's look at